2021 GM DFM system. How do you delete it? Well, we're in the assembly process now on this video, so this is technically a continuation, but the assembly process is the most critical process for actually doing the DFM delete on one of these vehicles. And I'm making this video as a more dedicated video to making sure that we cover all the needed steps to do the DFM process. Now, one of the things that I've already done is I sent out the ECM to HB tuners to get unlocked. I'm waiting on that to come back. When that comes back, hopefully by that time, I've already done some assembly on this thing, and we'll have a almost ready to go motor, and I'll be able to put it in while I'm assembling. Another step you need to do, of course, is preparation of parts. Very, very critical step, preparation of parts. I've already done a lot of cleaning on the engine block. I still have a few things I want to do, and I want to do it on camera to make sure I explain it to you. We're going to get started first, though, with one of the parts that I removed, and most people would have to send it out to a machine shop to have it machined, and that's the cylinder heads. Make sure you go through your cylinder heads. Absolutely critical step, because there's several very important details you want to make sure you take care of before you dare put this thing back together. Why would you take all this apart and not address making sure the cylinder heads are ready to go back in? One thing, valve stem seals. Get some new valve stem seals. They're really, really cheap. They're perfect to do while you're already doing the job, because to have a valve stem seal leak after this would suck to have to pull the valve train apart on top of the motor with the motor assembled in comparison to doing it when the heads are already off, right? So make sure you get that done. Milling the surface of the head, very important step as well. The surface of the head on these is very possibly going to be warped to the point of where it could cause an issue. Now this one particularly, we had one cylinder head, as you can see in the pictures, hopefully I can find it, that had quite a bit of distortion in one area. It was right over in the corner, and it was about 0.03 of deviation, so it was enough to potentially cause an issue. Now typically what you'll see is 1 to 2 thousandths, and it'll only be like around the bolts and kind of in the center area where it'll hit the bolts real hard, hit everything but the center, and like right over here it'll kind of miss when you run the mill past it, and then the next pass it'll actually cover it and pretty much hit everything. It might miss a corner or something. But typically they have some kind of warpage, and you can only see it on the mill. You can't see it with a straight edge. This one may have been enough, though I did not check, admittedly, that I could have possibly saw it with a straight edge, because it had 0.03 that I had to cut before I could hit. There was this one weird little pocket on only the one end of the head that I could not hit until I took 0.03 out of it. So that was a significant amount of warpage and could have easily caused a head gasket problem in the future. Now, the valves as well are a very important step to take, because you want to make sure that they are true. Now, this is the exhaust valve. These are typically pretty true. So when I grind these, they usually don't have much for deviation in them. They may have a little bit every once in a while. But typically, the issue with the exhaust valves and the seats is going to be the surface area of both where the valve contacts the seat, because it just gets a bunch of deposits stuck on it. You know, you burn all that gas, it tries to get out, the seat slams shut on the gas as it's leaving, and of course, little bits and whatnot get stuck between the seat and the valve, and it just builds up carbon and whatnot that gets smashed into the material of the metal. So exhaust seats and valves are very, very good to grind, because it will help them seal better to make sure you don't have a problem with that. Now the intake, on the other hand, is a little different story. You'll notice if you ever pull one apart, the intake valve is typically pretty clean, as far as the seat area, along with the seat where it's in the head is fairly clean in most cases. But there's a lot of carbon deposits on direct injection engines that will be left on the back of the valve and inside the port, and you want to make sure you get that cleaned out. As well as these intake valves are extremely prone to warping. You'll throw it on the valve grinder and it'll be spinning, and you can literally see the warp oftentimes. This one was actually pretty good. There was a couple of valves that had a bit of warpage. In fact, I might be able to find them here, because you can see how it ground unusual, if I can find one. Okay, there's one. There's one that's good enough to actually see. Not until the last one I picked up. But I'm going to wipe this off really good like, so hopefully you can see it better. But if you look on this side here, you can see how this ground part of the valve comes almost all the way to this edge of this taper of the black here. And then if I rotate it, the ground part of the valve only comes halfway across the edge of the black. So you can see the distinct difference in the amount of ground area on there. And that's because this valve was slightly warped. But now this surface that's nice and shiny is true and clean to where it actually contacts the head, so it will seal perfectly fine, and this won't be a problem anymore. Now, as far as the valve seats go, that's pretty much it, the valve seats and valves themselves. But you also should probably have the springs tested. Now, this is something I'm just starting to recommend. I typically never would have recommended it, but that's because I never used to see the problem very often. However, in recent vehicles, these newer ones, I am noticing a lot of issues with the springs being a problem, where the springs are actually breaking. So, I'm not going to grab that one yet. So here's the valve spring, right? I'm seeing a lot of issues where the springs will actually break somewhere, and obviously that causes a big issue. So if you have access to a shop with a spring tester, I recommend getting them tested. Reason being, so where I set this was I only did 300 thousandths of squish down on the valve spring, so I'm only pushing it, so I preloaded a little bit, then go 300 thousandths, right? And I wasn't very specific on the test. I'm not looking for spring pressure per the test. It's not a race engine. I'm just looking to see if there's any valve springs that are suspiciously weak, okay? So what I did is I set it up so I would have 300 thousandths on my gauge, and it just conveniently landed right at 100 pounds of pressure on the valve, or the spring itself. So most of them were between 96 and 103 where they landed. This one, however, was 87. So it's considerably low, a solid 10-ish% lower than the rest of them. And because of that, I threw a wire around it because I'm taking note of this one. I'm going to replace it. So once I get my new valve springs in, I'm going to compare what my setting was to the new valve springs, and if the new valve spring that I get matches the rest of these, perfect. I'll put one new one in. If it's way stronger, I may just replace all 16. If it's just slightly weaker, a bit on the low side, like it's 95 or something, right, instead of the 97 to 103 that I was basically getting. If it's like 95, I'll just replace the one spring. It's still going to be better than what that one was. One last thing before you put your cylinder heads on that you definitely want to do is clean out these injector holes. Now, if you have a severe case, you're going to want something like this. This is a 1964 drill bit, and you just simply use it as more or less a file. You put it in there, and you work it back and forth. Try and clean it out. If you have to grab it with the pliers or whatever, go ahead. Just be sure not to reef on it side to side. Make sure you're real easy on it, and you can just work it with your hand, whatever. Just try not to take too much material off when you're doing it, right? So that's if you have a really nasty corroded case. Start with this, and then go to something like this. This is a stainless steel pipe brush, essentially, and I'll go ahead and link a lot of the stuff I'll link in the description below. I'll give you like an Amazon link or something. I get a little spiff from those, but if you want something like this, it'll be in the description. This is a tube brush that just happens to fit perfectly in here, and all you got to do is run it in and out a couple of times, and it'll clean that up. You could cut this off, throw a drill on there, and drill, to spin it if you want, but it's really unnecessary when you can just do this. And make sure it's a fairly tight fit. So you notice this one, I'm having to push pretty hard, and if I try and pull back when I'm halfway in there, it gets locked in there. So you got to push it all the way in and then pull it out. Okay, so this is a pretty tight fit. Now, if you have this scenario, you can't do that with the head on unless you cut the end of this off and hook a drill to it, because if you spin it, then you can pull it back. You won't be able to get it. If you look here, it'll hit the cylinder wall about there, and then you can't pull it back out. You need to be able to push it all the way through to pull it back out. So something to consider if you're cleaning out the injector holes. As far as injector seal install, the seals come with my full delete kit, but I'll link you a video up in the corner for where I do like a seal install on that video, because it just takes too much time to talk about that on this video. With that, there's some other things to be concerned about, mainly on the engine block here, that you need to prepare before you put the heads in place. One of those things, of course, is the deck surface here, and you're going to want to clean it out really, really, really well. All flat surfaces, even the valley cover surface here, it's a good idea to clean it up. Now, there's one spot that I haven't quite cleaned yet. It's right on this valley cover surface here. I can see one little spot here. So I'm going to take this scraper and push it across there. And now it is cleaned off. I can go ahead and just further polish it up there. And of course, now it's really clean. This is a super scraper, and there's all kinds of different versions other than super scraper. It's just a carbide edge tool, but these things are phenomenal for doing this kind of work. So you just take this guy and you just clean it up. You don't want to use a whiz wheel on here. That's the worst thing you could possibly use. And when you're using these things, you got to be careful. Now, I'm going to do a intentional F-up on one spot because it's not going to hurt anything on this part of the block, just to demonstrate how you want to be careful with these things. And I'm going to do it right in this valley area here. I'm going to try and catch it in my hand because it's going to leave a peeling. But if you're pushing this along and you tip it over and scrape it like that, here it is, you're going to get a piece of metal off of there, okay? It will peel material off of here, okay? So when you're doing this, I'm going to have to clean that up now. When you're doing this, you want to make sure when you're on this deck surface that you don't let this thing tip. You keep it nice and flat, and you don't apply much force. Don't grab the thing and work it. Just push from the back, hold some pressure down, and push from the back, and kind of clean it up like this, right? So you just kind of run it over. If it catches, you stop, because if it catches, that means it's digging in. You're tipped over. It won't go now. It's caught. Tip it back. Now it moves, right? Now it's caught. Tip it that way. Moves. Okay, so it's kind of a finicky process. Just make sure you don't ruin the deck. Watch out for the corners. The corners can dig in if you tip it. That's why I don't recommend hanging onto it like this. You hold it loosely, and you just make sure you're pushing and being careful. There's that part of the process. I'll go ahead and I'm going to go over this all one more time before I put any head gasket on it. I just wanted to talk about that a little bit. You will have a lot of crap come off of there. Like I said, I did it once already. Now, the one thing that a lot of people skip, and it's very, very, very important, is cleaning out the holes for the bolts. When you pull the heads off, antifreeze typically lands in the cylinders, goes in the bolt holes, etc. And if you don't clean out these bolt holes, when you go to put the bolts in, it will create a hydrolock effect on those bolts, and there's a very good chance that you'll snap the bolt off trying to torque it, because these are torque to yield. So you bring them down to a certain light foot-pounds. I think it's 40. I'll verify later. And then you have to go a certain amount of degrees. Normally GM is 90 and 70. I don't recall what these were. It's been a couple months since I did one. But normally it's 90 and 70. And if that's the case, when you go to do that 90 degrees, it doesn't care what the foot-pounds are, right? So if it goes 40 of those 90 degrees, and then it's compressing liquid and it can't go no more, and you're turning it, you're not stretching the bolt at that point. You're just twisting the bolt, not stretching it. And if you twist the bolt, you're going to break the bolt. So, hugely important. Clean out these holes. There's a couple ways you can do it. One is an air nozzle blast. It'll blow out, but then it requires more cleaning and it creates kind of a mess. The other one is use a syringe, like something you would use to inject into food or whatever. Put a little hose on it, stick it down in there as far as you can, pull back on the syringe to suck out any liquid, and then go to the next hole. And then you could blow through there with an air nozzle as well, if you really want, and really get the rest of that stuff out. And then I suppose there is a third option I could give you. Let's take one of your old head bolts. This is actually for an LS-based engine. I keep this on hand because they use Loctite. But you take this guy and you just thread it all the way to the bottom. But why is this guy special? The old head bolt I took and I cut a groove in here, okay? I used a die grinder, cut a groove at an angle to create a little bit of a thread chaser or cutting end on it. And that will also allow the liquid to push up. So you thread that guy in there, the liquid will push up and out, and you'll be able to thread a bolt in after that. Hopefully, right? So the only hole I'd be concerned about is this one right here. This one takes a special shorter bolt than all the rest of it, and it's an Allen bolt. And that's because this is a shorter hole than all the rest of them. These ones go down a long ways. Actually, you probably could see it. Oh, yeah. So if I put this so that it just touches the thread, I'm not threading it in at all. That's where the top of the threads are. See where the bolt is. If I go here on this one, I'll hold my other finger on. That's where the bottom is on that one. So huge difference. There's an inch difference between this hole, and that's why that takes a different bolt. Now, finally, as soon as I get them in, we have to plug all those off as well. These are the DFM solenoid situation, and I'm going to try something on this video, hopefully, before I actually do the tune to shut off the AFM, because a lot of people aren't going to have a HP tuner's device like I have on hand, and so you're going to have to tow the vehicle. I might have an option to avoid towing it. I'm going to try it at the end of this process, and we'll see if I can do it, but I'm going to try and make it so you can drive to a local tuner to get the tune done so you don't have to tow it. I have an idea in mind. Leaving these solenoids completely disconnected will not work at all. So when you pull these out, try and salvage them, save them, leave them behind, maybe. We'll see if it works or not, but I have a thought. So I'm to the point of preparing all the parts that I have to put back in this thing or replace in this thing, and it's time for a little humble brag, I guess, of the parts that I offer in my kit. So here's the advertisement, if you will, for my own website, crazedperformancerepair.com, of some of the stuff that I include with my kit. Now, this is by far the most comprehensive kit you will find anywhere online, bar none. There's nobody else that offers what I do. A lot of the stuff that I send with the kit is not actively here in front of you, but I will go over some small things here as well as why I chose what I did, because I think it's important. I really do. I think it's important. Before I go starting to put parts in, I believe it's important enough that I want to cover it. Now, of course, I already talked about fuel lines on this thing and replacing those. We replaced the fuel lines on here because of the fire situation this one had. We want to prevent that in the future. We're replacing all fuel lines. They're supposed to be one-time use. I offer these on my website, of course. Everything you see here is something available on my website. What I'm going to do is I'm going to replace all the seals on the injectors. I'm going to replace, here's the seals for the injectors, replace the fuel lines. We're going to replace spark plugs, of course. I don't have the new ones right here in front of me, but they come with the kit. One of the things that has to get replaced is the camshaft. Now, I did mention I was going to touch on this a little bit because it's something that's important. There is a rumor that you can use the stock camshaft because this has all 8 cylinders as a DFM engine or using the AFM lifters. The rumor has it you don't have to replace the camshaft on these to do a DFM delete. Technically, it's true because you could go in and adjust the tune for the different cam profile, but the camshaft profile that is on these on wherever it is there, these DFM camshafts over here, on the DFM camshaft there is a different load profile specifically for the DFM or AFM lifters. Now, the difference in profile is going to be because of this lifter here. There is a little bit, can you see that? There's a little bit of slack right there, just that clicking back and forth. That little bit of slack that's in there, the cam lobe has to make up for that difference. So they have, on the load profile here, there is just a slight extra bump there that keeps a little more pressure on the lifter than if it was a standard lifter like this without that goofy slack in it, okay? So there is a different profile, and therefore the rumor of you not needing to replace the camshaft, though you could tune it because they are all 8 cylinders the same, you could tune it, it's not going to work properly on the factory tune. Will it work? Maybe. It's probably going to run poorly though. I'm not willing to experiment with it because I know there's a difference in how it holds the valve open. In fact, what that's going to cause is a slight extra hangover of the valve, which during the overlap portion of the cylinder's firing is going to cause the air to flow a little too much and lower the compression down at idle. So you're going to lose some compression. It's not going to fire as good. Not where you want it to be. So there's that. There's the lifters. As you can see, I have all the lifters sitting here in a bath of oil. Technically, you probably don't need to do this because I know these lifters do come pre-pumped up. They have oil in them, at least, of some kind of oil, but I don't know if it's an assembly oil, a mineral oil, or what. It is kind of thin, but it's not much different than the 5W20 or 0W20 that these things are supposed to run. Now, the DFM is 0W20, though I would not recommend that. I would recommend at least 520, if not 530 or 030. I would not go as thin as they recommend from the factory. I'm not going to get into why, but GM had a recall, and that's where I'm going to leave it, okay? So the camshaft that I will typically sell you in the 6.2 is going to be a Texas Speed camshaft, and the 5.3 is going to be an AC Delco camshaft for now. It might change depending on what's available. Texas Speed gives me the best price. BTR's great. Texas Speed, great. LS Acceleration, they typically sell a BTR cam, I think. But either way, any aftermarket cam on the 6.2 is going to work just fine, but there is no factory replacement. There is a factory replacement for the 5.3. So if you get a 5.3 cam, or if you have a 5.3, your kit's going to be cheaper because I can get the factory cams cheaper than I can the aftermarket grinds. So there's the camshaft. The lifters that I offer are going to be these Cam Motion. For the most part, this is what I sell. I do sell BTR cam or lifters as well. They're both LS7 style lifters. They're both great lifters. They're better than the factory quality. That's why I use those. The push rods. Here are the factory push rods. I do not sell factory push rods, and I highly recommend that you get the aftermarket push rods with your kit. So I have an option on there. I already have push rods, or I need push rods, basically, because I don't want you to put factory push rods back in. These motors are known for bending push rods. It's usually because of the lifter, that spring on the end of the lifter interfering, and you are bypassing that. But there is situations where it gets really close to the hole that it goes through the head on. So I have here what are a aftermarket performance push rod, and the reason these are better is a solid tube. So unlike the factory one where you have this friction welded ball on there, it is a solid one-piece design. The wall on these, I believe, is a little bit heavier, but it's definitely a better steel. So better quality steel, one-piece design, overall much better push rod, slightly smaller diameter. This is a 5/16, that's an 11/32, meaning that's 17 thousandths bigger diameter than this one. So this adds a little more clearance, gets you away from having an interference issue, and hopefully solves that potential problem in the future. Now, as far as bolts, at the moment, head bolts, I do the factory ones. I send one of the Allen head bolt and then 19 of the standard style head bolts. The VVT valve comes with it, and DFM is different than AFM, so I have to send a different valve for that. We'll talk more about that when I install it. The cam plate. We have to replace, well, we don't have to, but you should replace the cam plate. And this guy here, so you can see it's a like powdered metal plate. You do not want to over torque this. I send torque specs and install instructions with the kits as well. And this gasket here is the reason we replace this plate. You will be reusing these bolts unless you request for me to send you one with bolts. I do have ones with bolts on hand in most cases, unless I just happen to run out. If you have an issue with your bolts, you stripped out the head or something, let me know. I can get you some bolts with it. But the reason we replace this is if you look at these side by side, this is completely flat. I can hardly feel that gasket. And this is raised up and above. So if I bring my finger across here, it stops. If I bring my finger across here, it just glides past it. So this is obviously sticking out the way it should be so it can actually seal. This one's worn out, needs to get replaced. Now, things like valve cover gaskets, valley cover gaskets, pieces like that. Here is the valley cover itself. Here's the original gasket. Now, GM uses a material, it's kind of a rubberized material, and when you pull it off, I could go ahead, set this back on here, push it back down, and it would line up correctly. It goes back on, and it goes back on just fine. I like that feature of the factory GM gaskets when it comes to that. So what I always try to offer is a very similar, if not exactly the same gasket. So either, if you don't have a GM gasket with your kit, you're going to get something very close. This is a Molly version of it, and this is going to be the same exact design. The ones I don't like are ones like Felpro offers. So what Felpro does is they use a silicone gasket. You put it in here, and when it gets a little oil on it, it starts to expand. So if you ever go to pull this part off, like a valve cover, for example, you go to pull your valve cover off, guess what? You're going to have to replace that gasket because you'll never get it back in there. So I make sure to offer gaskets that don't have that effect to them, if possible. And the Molly, I try to avoid them because they do it a little bit. They're usually a little bit big. I'm noticing this one's a little bit on the bigger side. It's not quite a perfect fit. The ones that do fit really well, believe it or not, are some of these weird knockoff brands that I've never heard of before, other than since I started doing this. Like this guy here. This is a, well, I've heard of these. But Erling, they offer a gasket. This is the valve cover gasket situation. They offer a gasket that is very, very close to the feel, only a little bit softer from the factory, and it's just a perfect factory fit, so I'll be putting that on in just a minute. I got those gaskets. I do things, I go above and beyond with other little gaskets and stuff too. So this is for the oil cooler adapter on the engine oil cooler on the pan. Goes right on the side over here. Then we have, this is the fuel pump seal for right here. We're going to replace that. When it comes to the oil pan, I send a new one of these, new seals here, and I try to send RTV with it. I need to find some small RTV kits because the previous LS or LT based AFM engines, I have a kit that's perfect, but it comes with an extra gasket. So I may come up with another kit for these. Either way, I'll get you RTV with the kit. This is me just coming up with my ideas as I'm doing the video on what I need to offer as well. This gasket here, the crank seal, that comes with the kit. I could not find new O-ring for this, but typically they're fine anyway. O-ring for this I could not find, and I could not find the seal for this. So I like to replace everything. If you have a source for the seal, if you found a source, let me know. I'll be sure to try and get it from a place where I can get a good enough deal to make it worthwhile. There's all kinds of other things that I sell with the kit as well that I have not even covered, but basically that's the majority of it. Intake, exhaust manifold, I mean, so many pieces that I send with this kit. I just cover everything, even down to the oil filter. So there's my shout out for my company and what all I include with the stuff that you order from me. If you order one of these full delete kits, I throw everything in the kitchen sink at it as much as I possibly can. The only thing I can't include is antifreeze and oil. I try and make it so you can do the entire job, aside from surprises, without having to source parts anywhere else. So I'm going to get all these pieces that I just talked about prepared, installed, along with, here's the lifter trays, by the way. They have to go, new lifter trays. Forgot to include that, I guess. Like I said, it comes with more than I talked about. The lifter trays, they got to go with the lifters. I got to get the lifters in. I got to get the camshaft in. All right, so we are ready to start some of the assembly here. We're going to get the camshaft in. I have a couple ways that you can do this. You can see I'm wiping down the camshaft. That's because it comes with an assembly lube from Texas Speed. Or not an assembly lube, but like a machining oil or something of that nature. I don't know. Some kind of weird oil substance. Now there's two ways that you can go about this as far as before you put the cam in, what to do. I like to use assembly grease. I use racing assembly grease from Lucas. You can use Vaseline if you use a thin amount. Vaseline melts away when the temperature goes up. Or just get yourself some assembly grease. You can also use engine oil. I know this might be controversial for some people, the old school people, because you might think engine oil is not going to be good enough for break-in, but we don't have to worry about break-in on a roller engine like this. So when you have a roller engine, you really don't have a break-in period. It's good to go. I mean, the rings are already broken in. We don't have to worry about that. All we're doing is changing a camshaft. So it's literally a parts swap. And doing the grease like I am is actually technically overkill. But I prefer the grease just because it's the way I am. It's just what I prefer. So that's the way I'm going to do it. And you can see I have a glove on my one hand here. And you'll see why in just a second I do the glove. Alright, so the glove is because now I have no grease on my hand. Throw that away and I'm good to go. So that's that. We need to get lifters, cam plate, all this fun stuff in. Here's the trays. I already took and drained some of the oil out of here. And what I need to do now is one at a time, just set these lifters in here. The orientation of them does not matter. So we can just slide them in however we want because they are omnidirectional. They're not like the AFM lifters. And then the only thing that matters on this guide here is these grooves. You can see there's a hump right here. You have to match that on that side. So it goes this direction on this side here. And then you have this weird shouldered bolt that holds it in place. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get them all to this point where this is just started. That's it. And then I'll get the cam plate, chain, tensioner, all that fun stuff on here as well. But this is essentially the process of doing this. And then we got to put these plugs in, which I will have here shortly. I don't have them in yet, but they will come with the kit that I offer as well. I'm just waiting for them to come in. Once they're here, we'll get those in, and by then I'll have all this stuff prepped, and we'll work on, I'll show you how to do the timing marks and lining things up. Cam phaser's all cleaned up. I have the head gaskets in place just to kind of be ready, because I'm going to be putting the heads on soon. But we need to install this cam plate, and I thought it was important for me to show you that, as well as don't forget to put this guy in before you put the rest of it together, because of course that's kind of important for your fuel pump to function. So I'm going to get that guy torqued down in just a minute. I'm going to leave my socket on it, so if I put the cover on I won't forget. But we got a new timing chain. We have this guy here. I do not have the tensioner yet. I got to go grab one of them. But what I want to show you is this cam plate here. So a couple of things on this is there's a thrust side right here that goes against the camshaft. So it'd be a good idea to put a little lube on that edge to make sure that you don't start it dry. I don't quite have enough right there. Oh, here we go. Let's just grab some oil out of my little deal here. We just need oil on it. We don't need much. We just need a little lube there. There we go. It doesn't hurt to lube this seal either. Okay, so there's that. But the important part here is these bolts right here. So you can see I have Loctite. Now, if you watched the first episode, you heard me mention about the red Loctite and the guy having the issue. I believe somebody used red Loctite on it. Be sure if you want to put Loctite on these, because you're hesitant since they get torqued so low, that you use only blue thread lock, okay? Or Loctite, whatever you want to call it. Brand name is Loctite, but it's thread locker. And you don't need much, okay? So just a little bit of Loctite after cleaning them and drying them with a little brake clean. So these things actually only get torqued to 11 foot-pounds, so really, really low, right? I mean, you're in inch-pound range now. And what I recommend for tightening them down is to be cautious. Make sure you do the side ones loosely first, do the top one, and then lastly do the bottom one. Oftentimes the bottom one is kind of slotted, and since it's a weird tapered bolt, you want to be careful with that one. So now I kind of got them all snugged up. I'm going to go ahead and let it click. and I'm going to go ahead and go around it twice. Now the book will just tell you to tighten them, but like I said, start with the sides, do the top, and then do the bottom. Clearly we're looking at the oil pump here. I need to clean this up a little bit, but before I do that, I need to go ahead and pop this cover off. I want to cover a couple of things for you that we need to be aware of for your own personal vehicle if you're doing this job. Now the previous generation of these things, I always recommended pulling it apart, inspecting, cleaning, putting it back together. These ones, however, I don't necessarily recommend doing this. I would say use your best judgment based off of your situation. If you have a lot of miles on it, you might want to replace the pump. If you are pretty low miles, I guess I wouldn't bother necessarily. And if you're high miles, you could inspect it for a replacement. Now, what I'm going to suggest is if you do get to this point and you want to inspect this thing just to make sure, because these things prone to failure because of the design of them. You can see this is quite a complicated pump, and I'll get into that in a second. But if you do decide to inspect this thing for issues, what you want to do, wipe it clean, and you're checking this area. You can see the wear marks that are in here. That's where the pump actually rides, where all these veins will ride on the pump. If you just bring your finger across here and feel for any grooving in it, if you feel any grooving, it might be wise to replace the pump. If you don't feel any grooving, you're probably good to go. This one actually feels really smooth. But as far as why I don't recommend messing with these pumps a whole lot, besides maybe pulling this cover, is because of the complexity of them. We have a bunch of different fins or veins here, and these veins have this centering ring. I'm going to do it because I've done it before. There's a centering ring here, and this keeps these guys in the correct position. There's one on the other side as well, and it keeps them all spread out properly. The problem with these pumps is this is a cast piece, is my understanding, and because they have this large groove for this vein, you can see the veins go in deep on one side and they stay out far on another side, is if there's any small chunk of debris, which the oil sump on this thing just has a screen, any small chunk of debris like you have a blown apart lifter or something, that chunk of debris could end up in this pump, and because of its design, it will leverage against these veins if it gets right in the wrong spot, and it will end up destroying this piece. It'll grenade it. It'll just blow it apart, and you won't have any oil pressure. So these pumps are extremely finicky, and they also have a variable geometry. The reason for this vein design is the variable geometry, and I get into that heavily on another video. So feel free to check that video out if you want a in-depth description of LT-based oil systems and the pump exclusively, because I pulled one apart for the first time to really inspect them there in that video. And if you want more info, like I said, go check that out. I'm going to go ahead and clean this thing off a little bit. I'm just going to brake clean, lightly scrub, wipe it down, and then before I put it in the vehicle, the first thing I'm going to do is put a little like Lucas stabilizer or real thick weight oil in this port and just reach in the pump here area and turn it to get that oil into the pump. What that will do is allow for this thing to prime quickly when it does go to prime and not have an issue. Now, another thing with these pumps that's kind of important and why I wanted to show you is remember my comment about the tensioner and how I don't replace them with a damper anymore. And besides the fact that I don't think the damper even fits, the reason for that is right here. This seal goes to this part of the pump. And you can see there's a passage going in here. And I covered that in the video too. But this basically comes down to the variable geometry turbo situation. Or variable geometry turbo. Oh my gosh. The variable geometry oil pump situation where it adjusts its volume based on demand. But that's what it comes down to. That's why that is there. And this port is in the tensioner. Okay, so I finally got some parts in. You can see I have the cylinder head sitting up here. I have this bolt out because I want to mention something about it. The rest of the bolts are just in there and brought down but not tight. That's where that's going to sit for now. We just got done talking about the oil pump and the importance of just kind of checking that if you would like. It's probably not a bad idea. Now we're on to doing the timing components and the tensioner. And as I mentioned, I have some comments about this guy here. But we also have to consider some things with this. Now, if your tensioner does not come with little rubber pieces in these holes where the bolts go through, you're going to want to pull the ones out of your old one. This helps center that tensioner so it sits in the right spot according to the bolts. Otherwise, I'll show you the difference here in a second. Oh, they might have changed this tensioner. They did. Okay. Check your tensioner, I guess. So the old one had these rubber deals for centering this on the bolt because the bolt holes were sloppy when you had the bolt in there. This one, there's a little movement, not much. So the tensioner must be updated, which makes it so the bolt sits tighter in the hole, and you no longer need these guys. At least on this one. Check yours, because it may be different. However, we need to get this guy bolted down. Now, of course, there's this rubber seal here that I was telling you about for the oil pump. And then you can see there is a pin that is going to have to be pulled out at some point on this guy. Now, I think... I don't want to pull it out now. I'm just trying to pull it out some. There we go. Yeah, there is a interesting step in it. So you can see there's a weird step here. Now, you can, I believe... Oops. Oh, I'm going to fetch that now. I believe you can utilize that step to your advantage. There we go. So as long as you have it sticking out the back like this, you can use this guy to kind of twist it, and it will stretch the tensioner plastic out and allow it to get a little more collapse, so you have a little more room if you need it for whatever reason while assembling. Now, before I go fetch that bolt, I'm going to cover this here. This is the variable valve timing actuator bolt, torque to yield cam bolt. It's kind of a multi-purpose. Obviously, it holds the VVT actuated timing gear onto the camshaft, and it is a torque to yield unit. It's got a rather thin area right here, so when you torque it, it stretches it out a little bit. It's a one-time use bolt. You don't want to do it without replacing it, so of course I send these with the kits. But that's not the part that I'm worried about. It's this button here, okay? So you see this button. I had one vehicle in particular that I did, and it beat me up for a long time. It would not start after I did. It was an AFM engine. Same exact design, though. It would not start after I did the job. Well, it would not start a second time. So I started it up. It was running. It started to high idle, all weird. And I thought, what in the world is that about? I killed the engine. Once restarted, it would not start. Well, this ended up being a strange issue. This plunger had a weird burr in it to where it would only go a little bit. It would not go and actually go down like it should. You could not push this down. It had some kind of burr in it. I had to, with the vehicle, luckily it has a cover here for the solenoid that actually activates this. I pulled that out, and then I had to take the little snap ring out of here, pull this out, clean it up real lightly with like a 800 grit sandpaper, wet sandpaper. Just it's a little plunger inside there. I just lightly worked it, and then I put it back in there, and it was able to glide like glass again, and it worked perfect. Put it all back together, and the vehicle started up. So be sure to check this after you have everything tightened down, as well as right now, because if this thing is stiff at all, it should slide in and out relatively easy. It's just got a little spring pressure. If it's stiff at all, you need to figure out why and address it. So I was about to put all this together, and it dawned on me, I really need to cover this part a little bit heavier than just a quick once-over. The assembly of these is a bit of a challenge. So you can see I got the chain, and I actually have this gear off of here right now. It's not press fit on this era of vehicle, which is kind of nice because I can slide it in and out really easily. So I want to cover how to get this thing lined up decent so it's not too bad to do for you, because if you screw this up, if you're even one notch off, you're going to have to go back in here and redo everything. You might even bend valves if it's the wrong direction or 2 notches off, for example. So this is super, super important to get right. This is the one thing you want to take the most time on. With that, the Delete kit that I will be sending will come with a set of instructions very similar to this. Now, this is the LT-based AFM version that I just keep upstairs. I got to print one off for the DFM one yet for when I actually have these kits available. And this will kind of give us an idea. It's all pretty much the same stuff. The torques, they changed a couple torque spec things. But anyway, 18 foot-pounds on those 2 bolts, and that guy's in and good to go. But when it comes to the timing chain stuff, you can see it's telling you to put that on there, and then it's telling you put this on there, and blah, blah. You got a zip tie on here to hold it together. Don't worry about that stuff. That's not important here. What we want to see is the actual lineup of this guy. There we go. So you can see they have the dot on this thing here, and they have that spot lined up. Now, they make it look like you can just kind of put it on there and line it all up. That's really, really tough to do. So I have a way of doing it that helps out ever so slightly, but it requires you to do a couple different things. So as you can see on the image here, we have a dot, we have that. Pay attention to these 2 bolts instead, and make sure they're in the center of those 2 bolts. So you line up the crankshaft dot, which I've already done. Slide that guy out of the way. You can line up this guy by getting it on the cam. The cam has a notch in it. So the camshaft has a little pin, and that has to sit in a hole here. And if you don't have that lined up, you will damage things. So you want to make sure you get that lined up. But one thing to consider, I just can't hang on to this stuff today. This guy can go inward, okay? So it can go in a little bit, so you want to pull it out as far as you can until it hits this cam plate. And then you can see this surface here. This is the surface that goes against this part of the cam plate. So between this back of the cam side of this here, it's hitting the back of the cam plate, and then this hits that part of the cam plate. So you want to pull this out a little bit so you can line this up. Then you're going to take this guy and lightly push it until that pin, so you can see it lined up now, it doesn't turn. If I turn it like this, it's floppy. The moment it lines up, I can push it in, and now it's no longer floppy, and it's latched, okay? That's the spot you want it first. Now you need to take and rotate this guy so that this arrow here is exactly in the downward position. So you can take this and you rotate it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get down underneath, stick my head underneath, and actually line it up to the center of the crankshaft and between those 2 bolts as best as I can. And once I have that done, I'm going to literally take both gear sets here, and I'm going to line them up on the chain first. The dot and that guy there, we're going to line these up, and we're going to try to get them in the right position like this first. Okay? And even though I didn't go down there and look at it, I'm going to try and see if it'll fit. I'll just show you what I would typically do. If it fits, great. If it doesn't, I'll go ahead and do that off camera. But now that we have this sitting in position, and we know it's straight up and down, we're going to hold this right at the top here, verify, and then we can drop this down. We're going to push down on the top of this while putting it on here. And once it's lined up, I should be able to just pull up on the bottom now, push in on the bottom gear. We're going to move it over a little bit so this chain gets around that part of the tensioner. And then we can slide this over and work like that. And then you should, which mine did not line up, you can see it's kind of rocking on something. It did not line up with that pin. So you want it to line up with a pin like that. That way that stays true and lined up, and you're good to go. I'm going to have to get down there and rotate that thing like I was saying to get it right. Now I should not be hanging onto this actually. I should be hanging up like this. You want to try and avoid putting pressure on this plate because you don't want it to fall apart. But this guy, once you get it to fit in that pin, you'll know it, you'll feel it. And if it's bottom out and flush, when you have that camshaft pushed out, now you can see how I just did that. I stuck my finger down underneath in between one of the holes here in the valley area. I can push the cam back and forth here. And by doing that, you can feel if it's lined up or not. So that's another way you can kind of do this. But once you get this thing in the right position that you can slide this on and it lines up, you're pretty much good to go. Just verify by getting down there like I'm going to when I go to line this up with the crankshaft that these two are lined up perfectly. If they're lined up perfectly, you're good to go. Now you can start the torquing procedure, which we'll get into in just a second. Okay, I'm to the point now where I'm ready to torque it down. I have this just snugged, and the timing is lined up. Everything's good to go as far as that goes. Now, as far as making sure that you are on the right area of this phaser and you didn't screw something up, you're not misaligned with that camshaft when you put it on, you didn't just mash the pin in. If you're in the right area, you should be able to grab a hold of this area here and feel a little bit. So if I pull out, okay, pulling up pretty hard. Now I'm going to push in, and it should just go click just a little bit towards the inside. You'll be able to watch the top here. And you probably can't even see it, but I felt it. Just a little bit of movement. It's maybe 5/1000ths of an inch, maybe. And that is the in play. And if you grab a hold of this, you can feel it going back and forth. There's a little bit of play in there, and that's perfect. Now, if you do that, you don't feel any in play, there's probably a problem. And if you do it and you feel a lot of play, it's moving back and forth quite a bit. Visually, you can see quite a bit of movement. You probably got something wrong, okay? So before tightening this down, just check that. You could also, if you're new to this, rotate the engine some, just get a bolt on here, turn it over some, and make the judgment call by watching this pulley. Make sure it's not wobbling in any way. And then another option is to put a straight edge across here, and it should just barely clear this chain all the way around. So even down here, I could feel the distance here. There's, I don't know, 1/8 inch, 1/16 of an inch, something between there. That this chain is sitting past the actual metal surface here of the engine block. So just make sure everything looks good. And then this thing, now that the bolt is just snugged up slightly beyond finger tight, this thing is tight. Before, this had a little bit of looseness because it's a separate piece from this guy here. Of course, I only felt it as I was working with it because I'd bump it every once in a while, and that's why these things are sketchy to pop off of there, but hopefully it doesn't cause a problem for you. So with all that said, this is a torque yield bolt, one-time use only. 48 foot-pounds is what you start your torque at. And then we have to go 90 degrees. 48 foot-pounds and then 90 degrees on this short bolt with the short amount of stretch that it has. There is no way you're going to accomplish that without either a crank holding tool or some way to hold the crank or an impact gun. So bear with me. There's a couple ways you can do that degreen with various different ideas. And I'll let you make the judgment call as to what you're most comfortable with or what you have the tools with. But of course, you need a basic torque wrench in order to get this process started. So, with that, now I imagine I'm probably going to move the pistons. But if I don't, great. If I do, I'll show you a trick for that as well. Okay, see how it started turning the engine over? And we did not get a click yet. So now, we have to figure out how to make sure we get a click. Couple options. One, you can maybe wedge something between the chain and the pulley. Probably not the best recommendation. You could hold the crank. That's a pretty good option. Another one is if you go kind of quickly, sometimes you can get it, so I'll try that first. There we go. See how I went kind of quickly? And I got it to click, and then it started to move right after the click. So you can typically get it that way, and then you don't have to worry about trying to hold anything yet. But we do need to hold for the 90 unless we use an impact gun. Now, I like the impact gun because of its simplicity. In order to do that, we have to take a marker and actually mark things. And for the sake of not having to bring the camera down there, I'm just going to go ahead and show you on here. So you have 6 points of a bolt, right? Each one of these points is 60 degrees. So if that point rotates to where this point is, that's 60 degrees. So 60 degrees is each point. So if you did 1.5 points, that would be your 90 degrees that you need to make. So you put a marker mark. Actually, I'm just going to go ahead and do it on this paper. You put a marker mark on the bolt at one of the points, and then you follow that bolt. You're going to be turning clockwise, right? You follow that bolt until you're in the center of the flat, and then you mark the pulley itself, okay? And what you do is you use the impact gun to keep impacting this thing until it lines up perfectly with your mark you left. You can also mark it this way to do it manually by turning it against holding the crank. Now, the one thing that I don't, so impact gun, I don't like using an impact on a solenoid valve here. Okay, I don't like that, but simultaneously, I don't like not using an impact gun because you're putting a lot of stress on the timing chain. I guess you got to pick your poison, right? I'm going to do the put the stress on the timing chain one on this particular situation, and just show you how that goes. And we're going to leave this pin in here for that because we want to keep this as collapsed as possible. Now, it's going to put a lot of tension on this tensioner here, which is another reason I don't necessarily like doing it this way. But there is holes typically in the counterweight of the crank. This is where having the oil pan off comes in handy, because you can find a socket that appropriately fits one of the counterweight holes and use that to actually tighten or hold the crank. So that's one crankshaft holding option, is find a hole in the counterweight. Another option would be the thing that goes where the starter is. Now, I do not have the starter gear off, so that's not necessarily an option for me. Oh, not turning on there. I want it to turn right now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to mark my bolt now before I even hold the crank. And then I'm going to mark my pulley now because I want to make sure I don't accidentally turn that thing too much. Just trying to get the crank in its position that I need it to be in. So I'm looking to get the counterweight on the bottom, the front counterweight at the bottom. It's just now coming around. There we go. Yep, there's one hole. It's not a very deep hole, though. Let's see if there's another deeper hole. Oh, I don't have a very deep hole on this one. I'm going to try and find a socket that fits that hole that's drilled in it. Okay, that one fits pretty good. A 12 mil Craftsman shiny 6-point. Fits pretty good. We'll see if that's enough to hold it or not. I don't have confidence, but I'm going to give it a try anyway. Okay, so I'm against the block. Okay, I'm able to turn it some. So let's see what this chain tensioner does. It's actually not moving a whole lot, so I'm actually feeling pretty good about that. Okay, this one's actually going pretty well. The previous generation took so much torque, I was never comfortable with them things. Now, you can see I have the mark kind of close. I'm actually going to use a mirror to judge how close I am, because I want to make sure that I'm in the right spot. You can see it better with a mirror when you're looking down like this to see the 90. I do need to go a little more. I'm going to go slightly less than where that actual mark is, because I did turn it a little bit without the mark in it. Okay. I am pretty much right where I want to be. There we go. Right where I want to be. So, that's good to go. Now we can pull this guy out, and it actually takes no force at all because it's pretty much zeroed out. Now is where we put the oil pump on. So the oil pump here, remember I mentioned these guys here. That's kind of important that you have those. It's a bit handy. Another thing you want to kind of do is prime this pump before you actually put it on here. You want to put a little bit of, I like using Lucas Oil Stabilizer, so I'm going to go grab some of that. Drip a little bit in here, and then I'm just manually going to turn this guy over like this to make sure the vanes are wet with nice, fresh, thick oil. That'll allow it to suck the oil out of the pan really quickly when you do start the vehicle up. And then when I put this stuff in here, it's not like I put a ton of it. I'm just going to try and get it right on the hole there. And I only want enough to just get everything nice and wet. Because again, we just want it for priming the pump. And you'll be able to feel it as you're turning this. It'll get a little bit thicker or stickier. See, this one I'm not actually feeling right now. So I'm going to put a little bit more in there. Normally I don't have to put that much in, but this one's going to be a little trickier, I guess. Sometimes you'll have that. There it is. Now it's stiffening up. Now getting that pump gear to actually line up can be a little bit tricky. You might want to get a screwdriver underneath the actual pump gear itself to lift up and kind of turn it back and forth until you can get the thing to line up. Kind of a finicky little thing. There it is. Once it does line up, it's really obvious though. Now, I still have it somewhat loose, and what I want to do before I actually tighten this thing down is I want to take and I'm just going to kind of get this bolt ready. I'm going to pull up on this pump so it's against these two brackets that I had in place that I pushed down against the pump when I took it off of there. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up on this. Of course the bolt's too loose. Oh, maybe I'm going to spin it by hand a little bit first. Alright, there we go. Now pull up. Okay, snug this one up a little bit. I'm going to pull up on it again. Okay. I'm going to do these ones. And every time I tighten these down a little bit, I'm going to be pulling up on that pump. Even though I don't feel it moving. Okay, I had my first click of the torque wrench. Now with that all tightened down, I'm going to be able to remove these and start working on the timing cover. I'm going to have to put some RTV sealant on the timing cover. Then I can go ahead and put that on, and then I'll start getting to the oil pan. There's a couple real important things that we need to talk about for when you do this job to try and prevent having leaks on your particular vehicle. Putting this oil pan on is no easy task, okay? So when you go ahead and put this up here, the big thing is have everything clean and dry. I like using a actual fabric rag with a little brake clean on it to wipe everything clean after spraying it with brake clean. I did the brake clean spray several days ago already, okay? I let it sit and drip. I spray it again. I let it sit and drip. And this helps prevent from having more oil dripping, and I keep wiping up oil, right? Well, the last thing I do right before I actually put the pan on is I actually spray a rag with brake clean, and then I use that to just wipe everything down that's the sealing surface, okay? So that's the one step you want to make sure you do to try and get it to be as clean and dry as possible. Then, when we go to apply the RTV, what we need to do, believe it or not, is half and half this process. It's going to work the best for you. I found the hard way. Don't just put the RTV on the oil pan. It will cause you more issues. So you can see how we have the pump right here sticking way down. What happens if you put the RTV on the pan is as you're sitting the pan up here, you bump against that pump and you end up with the RTV scraping off and getting stuck on this pump and not making it to the part where you need to actually seal it. So instead, you make sure you wipe this clean and dry, and you don't put RTV on the front of the pan. You put the RTV on the timing cover, and then feel free to go back a little ways. You can kind of pick a marker, if you will, and what I'll do is I'll pick the second bolt back, and I'll stop with the RTV there, and then I'll go to the pan, and I'll use the pan, second bolt back, and I'll go just slightly in front of that bolt so there's a little overlap, and then put the RTV on there and go all the way down the back of the pan. Making sure, of course, we don't want RTV around these gasket areas. We just want the RTV on this part of the pan. Remember, we have a seal here for the oil passages. We don't need RTV on that. And same goes for where the oil pump sump is. You don't need any RTV in this area. You only need it on the pan area itself, so the timing cover, you can see the timing cover ends right here. So that's how I'm going to set my RTV up, and then of course there is two This right here is a lineup pin and a lineup pin, and there's little pins sticking out of the pan. Those go up there. So when you get this thing up there and you push the pan up, when it's lined up, it'll line up perfectly. You snap that into place, and you want to get that thing held. I'm going to use my portable screw jack, hold up on it once I get that up there. That way I can take my time, find my bolts, put them in the passages, or all the bolt holes, thread them in. Everybody's happy, right? So there's the one other thing here in regards to this pan, and it's when you're doing the bolts. They actually have the rubber pieces in here, of course. So you can see these little rubber sleeves. You want to put those actually in the pan, not on the bolt when you do this. So if they come out with the bolt, take them off the bolt, put them on the pan in the little holes, and that'll make the job a little bit easier because you'll set the bolt up and it will stick in the pan. So you'll just kind of stick it on the pan here. It'll actually hold its position. You can grab your socket, put it on there, and thread everything in. So that's the basic process I'm going to do to get this pan applied. And when it comes to the actual sealant itself, you don't want to apply too much. So when you put this on, you want to do a very equal application, a fairly small amount. You don't need a whole lot on there. I tend to prefer to go on the inside of the bolts because I don't want the bolt holes to leak. And you just do a little bit. Make sure you get a consistent amount on there. And you will continue this all the way around the pan, except for in front of that bolt section that I just showed you to choose as a stopping point. Again, you don't need very much. You don't want this RTV spewing out, getting into the oiling system in the sump area and blocking it on you. Yeah, that's the second bolt. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop just in front of that second bolt. One more quick thing I forgot to mention. When you put this on this side of it, you're probably going to have to use your finger and smear it a little bit wide because I'm not totally confident on which side the pan actually squishes against. It is a lot narrower than the block is, so I put a little bit extra width on it. If it's thin, it's no big deal. This is a metal-on-metal contact, so thin will still squish out plenty fine. And what is on the metal there, it's dry metal. It'll stick really well as well. So it's not like it's going to come off and end up in the oiling system. So when putting the oil pan up here, I did have one other little thing that I thought noteworthy, is the RTV did smack the bottom of the transmission here as I was trying to weasel this thing up there. Really tricky to get up there, by the way. But considering it smacked the bottom here, maybe you're going to want to put a little bit of RTV on the back of the rear main cover and seal area, just on the back side. I don't think you have to mess around with all the rest of it. Just the very back and then the front, like I was telling you earlier. Otherwise, it went pretty good. So that's pretty much that part. Now, considering we had this thing apart like I did, I don't want to just throw the filter on here dry. So I'm actually going to pre-fill the filter on this one. That way I give it a better chance of getting the oil as fast as possible. And I would advise you probably do the same, at least for the first startup. Now, these pumps pump so fast normally that you really don't have to worry about that. But considering all the things here, I want to pre-fill the filter. So now I'm going to go ahead and button up the rest, and I'll let you know what issues I may have trying to line things up, just in case there's something helpful. But if I don't mention anything, well, then it went smoothly. So as far as the cylinder head side of things go and torquing the bolts down, we have a specific torque sequence you're supposed to follow. It's a cross sequence, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and this is a numbered order, of course, and then 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now, there is a very noteworthy thing on specifically the driver's side head, and that is this bolt here. Now, all the bolts right now that are in the head, except for this one, are just snugged down against the gasket, just enough to kind of put a little pressure on it. It's maybe 10 foot-pounds tops, right? Not hardly anything. And this one here, I'm going to put in, it goes in this corner right here, and I'll just go ahead and do it the same as I did the others. There, just hit the bottom, it stopped. That's all the more I'm going to do on that right now. I am going to be torquing this in a minute, but first, that bolt I left for last because you saw it is an Allen head bolt, and it has a different torque specification than the rest of them. So on that particular bolt, we got 59 foot-pounds for the starting torque. I don't recommend just setting your torque wrench to 59 foot-pounds. I would start at 20, 40, then 59. You know, kind of work your way up and do the cross pattern. It's just something I prefer. It's more even and keeps the head more true and doesn't allow it to warp as easy. So, I don't know, just my belief. Probably overkill. But that's what I do. So I'm going to torque all these slowly up to the 59 foot-pounds, and then I do the actual degreen section. Now, one thing I have noticed is if you go straight to the 59 foot-pounds and you don't do the step-up thing, do it twice. Because that 59 foot-pounds, if you do it once, you'll come back to the first two, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, actually first 6, really. And especially the first two you do, you will notice you do 59 again, it'll tighten it quite a bit. It'll turn the bolt quite a bit before it hits the 59 again. That's because the gasket has squished some. And that's why I just do it slowly, 20, 40, 59. I believe it's a better way to do it. I don't know. What do I know? GM's telling me otherwise. So, 59 foot-pounds, and they're claiming this is the Allen bolt, but both of them start out at 59 foot-pounds, then 90 degrees, and then the last part is the difference between the other bolts and this particular Allen bolt. So the other bolts are 59, 90, 60 degrees. The Allen bolt is 59, 90, 40 degrees. So there's 20 less degrees of rotation on that last section of the bolt, and that's because that bolt is shorter. It has less room for stretch. So they have to design their torque specs for that one goofy bolt because of the coolant passage here that is a little bit different length. So with that, I'm going to start torquing this head down. I'm still waiting on my delete plugs. They have not showed up yet. I'm still waiting on those, but once those come in, I want to get those done so I can do the next head. But I'm going to torque this down, and the first thing I'm going to do after I torque it down is get that exhaust manifold pulled up and the gasket and bolts in there, and there's no way for me to really show you that, so we'll skip over that. You'll just have to take my word for it as far as that goes and getting that in place. Now the first one here is going to be easy for me to do, the cylinder head, because I have the manifolds. They're still tied together, going to the rear where the Y pipe is, you know, but I'm able to shift it over quite a ways because this head is not on, so this side will be easy. Once I do this side, things get a little tricky when it comes to putting the head bolts in. I'm going to have that manifold bolted on, but I have to take a socket and wedge it between the exhaust manifold and the cylinder head after I get a couple of head bolts in the middle here. So the head bolts that go here, I'll throw those in first. And then the manifold here, I throw a socket in there to create enough of a wedge for me to get the rest of the bolts in place and be able to torque things down. That's how I'll tackle the next head. And then, of course, we'll do a little more conversation on the fuel system quick. So one other recommendation I have for you is to use the marker trick as well when doing these torques. So once you get them all torqued to 59 foot-pounds, you're good to go. You don't have to do anything except for the next couple of steps, the 90 and 40 or 90 and 60 degrees. Now, every time I do a degree of rotation on the bolt, what I like to do is take a marker and mark the bolt. So when I do the 90 degrees, I'll mark the bolt. That way, if for any reason somebody or comes in or I get a phone call, whatever, while I'm doing this and I'm interrupted, I can stick my head around the corner and go, wait, did I torque this bolt down or did I do this rotation or whatever? So if I see one mark on it, I know I did the 90 degrees. If I see two marks on it, I know that bolt has been completed at the second stage of degreen. And so I like to just put a little mark on the bolt every time I complete one of those steps. I finally got my DFM plug kit here, one of two options. I have the Texas Speed version coming, as well as I had the BTR version coming. The BTR made it faster than the Texas Speed version, and I'm doing that one in here because it's quicker, and I was waiting too long for the Texas Speed one anyway. So with that in mind, I am going to have both on my system as far as what's on hand to start with. Later on, I'm probably going to decide, hey, this kit worked better or whatever, and that's the kit I'm going to go with, but I'll have the other one as a backup option in case I have a weird shipping situation like I did with the first version of the Texas Speed that I originally ordered out of the gate. So there was lost package, long story short, took too long, I ordered BTR, got it right away, just worked out better. So with that said, now I noticed that the BTR ones I saw on one of the websites where it was installed with it this direction in the cover And I thought, well, that seems silly. It should go this direction. However, upon further investigation, I noticed that there's a reason it was installed the other way. And it comes down to this factory taper on this side. It's to allow the O-ring to squeeze in. And on this side, it is not factory tapered. I actually took a chamfering tool and ran it around a while to create a taper on there for the O-ring, because I really want the label to sit outward, and I just think it'll look a lot better. So, if you happen to see this part of the video, I doubt it, BTR, but if you happen to see this part of the video, this should be on the underside, on that side, so that you see it right here. If you really want to advertise, put it on the other side. With that said, I think it would also be better if you could install it this way, because this snap ring is steel, and it being exposed to the elements is going to rust. So, I chamfered it as best I could, and I'm going to see if I can squeeze that guy in there. But I have what's called Sil-Glyde. I'll try and throw a link in the description. But this stuff is incredibly good for trying to get O-rings to sit in place. You don't need a whole lot. I'm just going to put some of it on the system. I'm going to put it on the other side too in case I can't fit it. That way I can wipe my finger off, not have to worry about it. And we're going to try and push this guy in there. Now this O-ring is not what came with the kit because I could not find it. Either I lost it or BTR forgot to send it. I don't know. It could have rolled off. I dumped the bag out here, so maybe it rolled off somehow. I don't see it anywhere. Regardless, I'm going to try and push this guy in here and see if I can't get it to snap down into place from this direction. Oh, there it goes. All right. And it did not feel like it tore the O-ring because it didn't have a soft hit like there'd be an edge of O-ring there. So I think we're good to go. So I was able to chamfer it good enough to get it to squeeze the O-ring. And now BTR will be facing whoever looks in the engine bay, which is a nice little plus. And I just got to slide this guy in place. I do not have a snap ring pliers on me at the moment. Oh, you know what? I don't need one. Ah, there we go. Ha, I got it. Sweet. Okay, so that was pretty simple. That's in place. Now we need to get these all in place. But you can see there's a bunch of bags of a bunch of parts, O-rings, and everything is separated, including the washers here. So what I need to do is I need to take each one of these individual O-rings, slide it onto its corresponding, there's two different sizes, deal. I'm going to use the Sil-Glyde in the holes there as, again, just the same. That way when I push this down, it'll push down easier. And then this bolt holds down on, this is the original bolt for the original solenoids. Well, have this washer on it and hold down on these plugs. So I'm going to get all that done, and we're going to move on to the next step. Now, I know when I was pulling this off of here, it was bumping this and giving me a little trouble, but I'm having a hell of a time getting these head bolts back in. So typically the previous generations, I would just pry the manifold, stuff a socket in there, it'd give me enough room and I could work with it. I'm not able to work with it on this one. So what I'm actually going to do here, I already have the head bolts partially loose, but I'm going to loosen them up a decent amount in hopes that I can kind of pop past the dowels that hold the head in place, but not loosen them up so much that the head comes out of center to where those bolts can't go down and it scratches any surface, any milled surface, or wrecks the gasket or whatever. Just enough so I can get past those dowels, because I think that's all I need to get the bolts past the manifold when I pry on it. And that's kind of where I'm hoping to get these things through there. Now, perhaps I am doing my order of operations wrong because of the circumstance of waiting on parts. And I should have did this head first, maybe, when I could have had the exhaust manifold slid over more. But now that it's bolted down on the other side, I can't do that. So I don't remember how I took it apart, but perhaps that's why, as I'm doing the wrong order of operations here. I wish I would have done this one first, now that I'm seeing what I'm seeing. So besides order of operations situation, I believe I have a way to correct this if you run into the same scenario. If you happen to screw this up or whatever, I pulled the heat shield off and I was able to pry it just enough, but I had to utilize a long pry bar up above my head and then work the bolts, and I got them all to start into place. So now I can actually snug everything down, start the torquing procedure, and you can see I have a socket here, that way I can get at those bolts on the bottom. I believe you could also loosen that manifold back up on the other side, and by doing so, you'd probably have enough room to work to pry this out of the way and make it work. It sucks so bad trying to line those up, so I chose to pull the heat shield off. Lucky for me, this is a new enough vehicle, it came off relatively easy, so it wasn't too big of a deal. But I'm going to get all these bolts down and then get that heat shield back on and move on with this job. Well, I got all the head bolts torqued down, degreed, all that fun stuff, and the spark plug's in. I was going to put the oil dipstick in, and I noticed something upon putting it in. This end here seemed a little bit crooked, a little off, not quite right. And I was looking at it, I'm like, did I bust that thing? Because it did not look right. And I'm sitting there looking at it. I pulled the O-ring off, and I'm watching it, and I could see where it looks like a tube going inside of a tube, and I'm like, what the hell is going on here? So I figured it out, and it's important, and why I'm here explaining this unnecessary thing, or so you would think, because I think other people might notice this. It's actually the design of this thing. I don't know what GM was thinking here, but the O-ring sits in here, and what they actually have is this tube goes all the way to here. It's cut off right here, and then there's another tube here that is inserted into it and soldered on. And they only soldered it in one little area. They didn't get it all the way around is what it looks like. At least that's my assumption, is it's soldered. Now, I have not heated it yet, but I want to do it here on camera because I'm very curious what's going to happen if I heat this guy up. Will I be able... Ooh. Don't want that dust in the engine. Will I be able to unsolder this thing? And if so, can I solder it back on correctly and fix it? Because I don't want this thing falling off in the engine. It might cause issues with pulling the dipstick out. There's a sharp edge on here. So let's go ahead and try and unsolder this and see if it's possible or not. So we have it here in the vise. I'm just going to go ahead and give this guy a little bit of heat and see if I can't get it to come undone. Well, that's a lot of bit of heat. It should have came undone by now. That might not be soldered into place. Oh wait, it's getting loose. Maybe it's brazed. Or am I just fatiguing the metal? Feels like it's over here where it's connected. Or it's just busted. It might actually be busted. So I'm going to wire brush this clean quick and take a look. It might be a situation where it's just not very strong and me just pulling it out, because you have to kind of work it and twist it and manipulate it to get the O-ring to come free. Might be just enough to fracture where they crush that down to create that O-ring area. So I got it all cleaned up. I know you guys can't see this. It's just, it's too small for me to actually be able to show you. But basically what it looks like is, you know the tubing cutters you'd use in plumbing or whatever? They have one of those is what they must be using to cut this O-ring area or crush this O-ring area. Obviously, I'm sure it's on a machine scale, a bigger scale. But instead of having a sharp edge, it has a blunt edge. And it just crushes the tube after going around, probably really fast in a machine, but after going around. That's what it looks like they did this with. Unfortunately, it made this one side really, really thin. I could see the other side here has more material, but it too is also fairly thin. So it's kind of a poor way to do an O-ring. And I can't get one of these ordered and just put it in later. It's actually coming up on the weekend here, and I want to get this thing done like tomorrow, okay? And it's literally, I think, 10 o'clock at night right now. So I am going to actually repair this thing, and what I'm going to do to accomplish this is I am going to find a tube, maybe even this one. No, this is too big. I'm going to find a tube. I can clean this out, slide inside of here, slide another tube on the outside of that, solder it all together, clean it out really good, and it'll be able to create an O-ring area for me that I can have the O-ring on still, while still maintaining the same design. I'm going to go ahead and fix this, and then we'll get you guys a view of what I ended up doing, and we'll move on with this project. All right, it is all fixed up, and as you can see from left to right, I took pictures throughout the process so you can kind of see what I was doing, but basically it's soldered in there. It is rock solid now. I'm able to continue assembly. This is not going to come free anymore. I took my time to make sure I did it in a way that's really, really nice. I even painted it up so it looks new again. So this guy is going to go back on. I just got to throw the sleeve back on here. Throw a little grease on here so it can go in there, and it's ready to go. So I'm going to get this in there. I'm going to start working on some of the pulley stuff, get that stuff back on, and get the rockers in, which we'll talk about when I do the rockers. Because that is an important step. So you can see I have the rockers in place, but I have a rocker in my hand. I'm going to show you guys a quick way to actually measure your pushrod length with the pushrods you have. Now, what you want is you want between 25 and 50 thousandths of squish on the lifter itself internally. And the way to measure this is when you go to put your rocker on, drop your factory pushrod in there, and I want you to do this before you even order parts from me, if possible. I know it's a little late in the video, but if you do this before you order parts from me, I can make sure to get you the right length pushrods. The stock length is 7.850. However, oftentimes after the heads are machined, you want a different length. So take your factory length, okay, which is before you take anything apart, undo a rocker arm, and then take that rocker arm and bring it down by hand like this until it contacts. You have to do one that's not opening the valve, of course. It's got to be at the bottom of the cam lobe. Turn this guy until it just stops from your finger real easily. Don't push it hard. Don't try and tighten it with your fingers. Just go until it stops. It'll be contacting the actual valve itself and then the push rod on this end. Once you have contact, then you actually attach your ratchet on here, and you want to watch your socket. Mark where it is. Pick a point where you like it. Orient it wherever you can to see a marking point. I like sockets with holes in them because you can just watch the hole. And what you want is you want that thing to go one full turn is about 52 thousandths of an inch. So 50, 52 roughly, depending. One full turn until you feel it bottom out. You'll feel it just stop. It's resting on the actual cylinder head on this perch. Don't tighten it after that, but if you turn it and it goes more than one turn, you want a shorter push rod. You need to keep note of how much more. If it goes less than one turn, you're good. If it goes more than one turn, you definitely want to get a shorter push rod in there. And if it goes a turn and a half, we want to get you a real short push rod. So this one would have gone a turn and a half on the factory push rods. So I have the shortest push rod in there. This is, of course, after having the heads machined that I'm doing this. You could also request that I ship the push rods at a later date if you would like. But if you do your stock one before you pull it apart, I can roughly guess what it's going to be depending on how you get the head machined. Now, if the person that machines the head keeps the stem height perfect to where it was from the factory, you're only going to end up, so say it was right here before, you're only going to end up gaining a little bit more because it's going to come down and your push rod, actually, try and think about that. The cylinder head's going to come down, so your push rod's going to be pushing more, so your push rod will be a little bit long. But that rarely happens because typically the seats are too bad and the valve is getting ground, and you have to grind the top of the stem to make up for the valve and the seat. Now, to make up for the seat, a lot of times can't happen because you would have to take too much off the top of the stem. So you end up with a situation where it's higher than it was before, needing a shorter push rod. And that's the situation I had here. The seats were really bad on a lot of these, and I wanted all the seats the same length, or same cut amount. And so I had to cut a decent amount off of them, which in turn ended up making me want shorter push rods. So I do have shorter push rods in this one than stock to maintain that 1 full turn, which is 50 thousandths. And in fact, some of them are just under that, which is perfect. That's exactly what I want. Just under 1 full turn or at 1 full turn, and that's perfect. And that's where this one is sitting. So these are the push rods I'm running, which on this one happen to be 50 thousandths shorter than factory. That doesn't happen very often. These ones were long to begin with because I was, when I was tightening it down, I actually ended up going like 1.25 turns on this one. So these were long to begin with. I knew I was going to have to run shorter push rods, but after doing the cylinder head work and how bad the seats were, I ended up having to go considerably longer. So to be on the safe side, I could just send you slightly shorter push rods. I've never seen one from the factory that's less than 1 full turn, which means you might end up with it being a 1/2 turn instead of a full turn, which would work, but I highly recommend checking it before you just assume, okay? So check your push rod length before you take it apart, and then I'll send you what we think is appropriate. You just got to message me, and we will correct it if we need to later on. I'll get you the correct set if you really desire it. You just have to cover the shipping. So we'll get as close as possible. We'll try and get that push rod length correct. With all that in mind, we need to move on to fuel lines here. And we have brand new fuel lines, of course. And we want to torque these to spec. Now, when you're reusing lines, say for diagnostics' sake, I just tighten it. I mean, honestly, I don't even torque them because I kind of know by feel what the torque is going to be. I've done this enough time with this style of fuel line, especially on diesel engines, so I kind of have an idea of where the torque is going to end up anyway. With that all in mind, how does one go about actually torquing these, okay? So it's not just a simple tighten it down and hope it's good to go. There is actually a way to torque these accurately. Okay, so the aftermarket lines are not necessarily always going to be a perfect fit, and this is actually an example where they weren't a perfect fit. It's sitting kind of off of here, but you can kind of just push it in and it'll snap into place. I left the bolt slightly loose, just enough that it can move until I get these nuts torqued down that are on this thing. Not sure why, but this nut is binding ever so slightly, just enough that I can't quite turn it by hand. So I'm using a wrench to bring it down to contact point. All I'm going to do is use the wrench for contact point, and then I'm going to grab a torque wrench and a crow's foot in order to torque this down. Now, when it comes to a crow's foot and torquing things down, leverage points. If you have this guy here, you're going to increase your torque ever so slightly. Now, it's probably not very measurable, but it is a factor to play in here. So, if you have it at a 90 degree from the torque angle there, it'll actually torque exactly what the torque wrench says it's torquing, because there's no advantage to leverage. So that's how I'm going to set my torque wrench, is at a 90. And then I'm going to go ahead and start tightening. I don't want it to ratchet because I want it to maintain that 90 position. And the torque on these guys is 22 foot-pounds. So I'll get the other line in here, get it torqued down, and move on. So I pretty much have the engine all taken care of on the mechanical side of things. Aside from the belts, I did put the one belt on, and then I thought to myself, I should probably show how I do this because it's probably going to help somebody. Okay, so in order to get the belt on, I actually use zip ties. I don't have a special belt install tool or anything fancy like that. Well, I guess I have them. I don't use them. I literally just use zip ties. So what do? I set the belt up in the routing, and then I find the most ideal pulley to use the zip tie on, which is typically the crank pulley because there's a pass-through area on it. And I use a zip tie to hang onto the belt. I'm expecting to go counterclockwise. And by putting the zip tie here, which I do 2 of them on this one because it's quite the big jump here that I'm going to have to stretch this belt. This is a stretch belt, of course. That's the only reason for doing this. But I put the zip ties on there. I get my socket into place. Of course, you got to plan your socket for when the belt comes around because it's going to go over on this side. And then I have to use my hand to utilize or to get this maintained on the pulley up here, the following pulley that is past where the belt is trying to jump on. I'm going to give it a little help and turn it the right direction here. Now this is a really tight belt, so it does get quite tight. And you can see it has popped over now, and it's not quite all the way, so I'm going to go just a little more. And now it's going to fight the zip ties. And I could, right now it's actually going against this belt as well. I could technically just force it, and it would break these zip ties. But I don't prefer to do that. I'd much rather take them off and not stress the belt more than I already have just putting it on. So we're going to break these zip ties here. And then just to make sure, I'm going to rotate it a little bit. And everything's smooth, everything's in the right area. We are all lined up and good to go. So that's how I attach these belts here, these stretch belts on stretch belt equipped vehicles. Now, sometimes you can do it by hand just by pushing against it as you rotate it. This one was far too tight to even think about that being a possibility. I can do it sometimes with the AC belt, but I've gotten to the point now where it's just easier and cheaper to grab a zip tie. Now, as far as the rest of this job goes, I do have all the stuff pretty much on the engine side of it. I need to do the fuse box, but before I can do that, I have to do the radiator. So I'm going to go ahead and start with getting the PCM back in place. That is a necessity, and I'd like to do it before I put the radiator in. I just think it'll be easier. And then, of course, I'm going to tidy up some of the wiring and whatnot once I get the radiator in place and kind of keep going from there. Now, one thing I want to note, which I said I would talk about, is the possibility of driving this to a tuner to get the tune done. Yes, you had to have sent your computer out to get it unlocked, the first of 2 ordeals to unlock it. But once it's unlocked, now you have to hook up to it with an HP Tuner's device and actually unlock it with the tune itself, the computer that you're using to tune it, or register it to the device you're going to tune it with, which isn't actually real tuning. All you're doing is disabling the AFM essentially, or DFM. But in order for that to happen for somebody who doesn't have the system to turn it off, what I'm going to attempt is I'm taking all the old solenoids, that's why I said to keep them, I'm going to plug them into this. So we're going to drape this over here and then have it all connected, and hopefully I can just use the manual override in the transmission and try and keep it in a gear that doesn't try to activate the system and throw this thing into limp home mode. We're going to give it a try on this one before I actually do the tune, because I really want to see if I can allow this option for anyone else who might want to do this job. So the goal here on this channel is do it yourself, do it at home. But there are some things you will have to outsource, for example, tuning, if you don't have the stuff to do it. I will also show the process of the tuning portion of it, because I think that's an important process too, but that might be a separate video. So make sure you stay tuned for what I decide there. So clearly I got the radiator in, and I'm tidying this job up. I have oil in there. 8 quarts for now. We'll see what happens. Actually, just over 8 quarts. I'm sure it might take a little more since it was a completely dry engine. But I'm currently sucking antifreeze into the engine. So I pull a vacuum on the engine. It's a special tool that I have, and it allows me to suck the antifreeze in rather than trying to pour it in and dealing with burping the system. This gets rid of all the air in the system, which is a really nice thing to have. So if you don't have one of these, I suggest you look one. Of course, check the description. But I'm gonna lift this thing up and check a few things underneath. I got one more plate to put on underneath, a plastic cover. I got to put the wheels back on, things like that. I do have the solenoids actively laying on top of the intake manifold, so I'm hoping that's good enough. I might put one zip tie at the back just in case it were to try and bounce and drop down if I hit a bump or something. but that'd be the extent of it, because like I said, I'm only testing that for you guys. We'll be doing the tune on this one as well. But once this thing's full, I should be able to fire this up shortly after I button up the last couple little bits here. The radiator shrouding was a challenge, to say the least. That is real tough to work in there, just like I suspected when I pulled it apart. Now, if you saw that video, you know what I'm talking about, but otherwise, there's a lot of shrouding on this radiator that is very difficult to put back into place. It takes a lot to get all the clips and pieces stuck right in the right position. As far as the electrical box goes, there was one thing noteworthy on that was really nice. It's a feature that GM added, but basically right where the bolt goes down in, there is a recessed piece of plastic in a hole, and if that plastic thing pops up above the hole, it's tight. You'll notice just as it pops up above the hole, the screw will suddenly stop turning. So that's how you justify that part of it being done. So it looks like I have maybe a little over a gallon left. I had 2.5 gallons mixed in here. So a total, yeah, I had a total of 4 gallons in this bucket. Yeah, 4 gallons when it was mixed. Are in this bucket, or were in this bucket. Looks like I have about 1.5 gallons left, and I already put 1 gallon in the engine. So it takes approximately 3 gallons worth of mixed antifreeze, maybe a little more. I have 2 screws. I believe I know where they go. I got to put in, and then, like I said, the stuff below in the wheels. So we'll be right back for the attempted fire up. Hopefully everything goes smooth. I will do the first fire up attempt on camera, and we will see how it runs. Now, I do not have the plastic guards on top of the coils, the plastic pieces, and that's because this thing was in a fire and the back of them was burned. I'm going to give the customer the option to keep them off of there. Maybe he wants to replace them. Maybe just leave them off. The back of it's kind of melted and funny looking, so I figure, why even put them back on? I painted the valve covers to look nice. You might as well just look at that, I guess. So, well, it's time for the first test fire. I am going to hook the battery up. I am not going to tighten the battery clamp, because you never know if you have to do an emergency disconnect. Oh, this clamp has to be tightened some. Well, I guess I spoke too soon. It's too floppy loose on here. So I'll tighten it just enough that it's not floppy loose. But I can still rip it off of there in a hurry if I have to. Okay, there we go. I can still wiggle it a little bit, but it's not super floppy. Now, I need to go start this thing and hear the rattling, because it's inevitable. You do a big project like this, lifters have sat there without oil, everything's completely bone dry as far as the oiling system goes. It's most likely going to rattle a little bit at first startup, and then it'll clean up rather quickly. And if it's rattling still not long after first startup, I will bring the RPMs up to get the oil flowing, and that's probably what you're going to hear here. Now, I do have the solenoid sitting there. I will be test driving it like that and seeing what I can do, like I said. With that, let's go ahead and try and start this thing. God, I hope I don't have any issues, but as is a project like this, it's very, very possible. Up until I move the vehicle, I can't get in or out of here without going through the back seat and jumping around, and I want to be able to kill things if need be, if I can't shut it off with a switch or whatever. So I'm going to use a pry bar, push the brake button, then use my hand to hit the start. Okay, so first things first, I just keyed on. You got to push and hold the start button so everything lights up. I just want to take a look that it's not like freaking out on me. Everything looks normal. Now I'm going to push the brake and start it up. I hear leakage. I hear lots of leakage. What do I got? Oh, I won't be starting it for a while. I think I forgot to connect the fuel line. Oh, it just didn't click into place. There it is. I probably didn't push it down all the way, which means I should have a clip up here, but I don't see it. There's supposed to be a safety clip for this fuel line, but I honestly don't see it. I'm going to have to review my footage on this thing because this may not have had a clip to begin with. This was a fire vehicle, and I'm not about to start it on fire again. With that said, I'm going to let this thing sit for several hours and all that fuel to dry up, right? So I guess I'll start it after a little while. That was the first attempt. Big fail. The reason I let it crank for so long in the first place is because it's a high pressure fuel system design. And with that, oftentimes it takes a while to get enough pressure on the high pressure fuel side for a vehicle to start. And that's what I just thought it was. I'm like, oh boy, this is cranking a while. It's not going to start. Well, it's because it doesn't even have fuel. So, I mean, it had fuel, but not in the engine, on the engine. That's not ideal for starting it, especially if you don't want to have a fire. So, we'll be back after I let it soak for a while, or dry for a while. It's already soaking, and we'll try again. Okay, fuel line is actually attached now. I have not had a chance to review a video to see if I lost the clip or if it just wasn't there, but I'm sure I'll find out later. Video editing. I'm going to go ahead and try and start again. It's been 6-7 hours since I did that last one. I got distracted. I have plenty to do. It's literally 10 o'clock at night right now. I'm just going to start it up. If it starts, I'm sure it will, and see how it goes. After that, I'm going to bed. I got other things to do. So I'm just out here to do this part, and that's it. And then we will come back for checking the solenoids and all that fun stuff. Because I definitely want to see if we can get you guys to a tuner without having to tune it yourself in your shop or tow it. Alright, this time we're going straight to starting it. No screwing around with keying it on. Okay, we got oil burning off the manifolds, probably a little bit of fuel remnants on the one side, but otherwise it runs. It seems to run okay. It had a weird thunk that I'm not used to hearing. It kind of made me go, oh boy, do I need to do something? But it does still have a little bit of a ticking. Now, before I judge that ticking, and I prefer you do the same if you get this job done, drive it. So you can see I revved it up. The ticking did go down a little bit. I don't know if you were able to audibly hear that. The ticking got a little quieter, and it didn't really completely go away. Also, we do have all these solenoids sitting up here. I don't know if the computer is doing any weird testing with those or not. So I'm not going to judge it yet, like I said. Let's go ahead. Let's get this thing on a test drive. See if I can keep it from activating and throwing all the codes and all that good stuff. But first things first, I got to get it out of the shop. It's really tight in here if you didn't know. I literally have the rear wheels on these little stands so that I can slide the rear end over just so I can pull this thing out of here. This side of the shop is not my side I usually use for trucks. Usually I use the other side, but that side is occupied with this Antiquador up here, so I don't exactly have it available. So, since that one's not done, and this one was an emergency job, I had to put it on this side. So with that, let's get to a drive. Well, truck is out here running. I have not done anything more than idling it. We have those solenoids in place. We're going to go on the test drive. I just pulled it out, and I have to admit, it always amazes me how quickly these newer trucks warm up. Quite difficult to get the camera in here, but you can see it's already pretty much up to temperature. I mean, holy crap, I've only had this thing running for, I don't know, 6 minutes tops. And given it is warm outside, but it's not warm in my shop by any stretch of the imagination. It was like 67 degrees in there this morning. And I can't believe it's already at 210 almost. So with that, I have those solenoids in place. I need to figure out how I want to test this. So we got reverse, neutral, drive, L1. Can that, there we go, L1, L2. Okay, so I'm able to manually shift it with this. So I think that's what I'm gonna do and see if we can't prevent the AFM, or DFM I guess technically, from activating. So that's how I'm gonna drive the thing. We're gonna back out and go for a test using the manual shift. Now this is gonna be quite tricky holding a camera, but I'm gonna see what I can manage here. And of course, I'll have to tell you what lights come on because I don't even think you can see the dashboard, honestly. I'll just switch hands. This camera is not going to be holdable this way. There we go. And I should probably close the window. All right. So there's first, second, third. I think this is a 10 speed. I'm not positive, but I think it is. Fourth. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna avoid, I don't know, probably anything after 7th gear. We're gonna see if we can stay, you know, get up to 60 miles an hour without having to utilize anything past 7th gear, which I think is overdrive. I'm not positive, I haven't checked. But if we can stay out of overdrive, I think it'll keep from activating the DFM system, I think. Let's go ahead and do a test quick. I'm gonna go ahead and just let off the throttle. We're in 4th gear right now and see if it kicks it in because of deceleration. Okay, it did not. So L4 is not doing anything yet. And then what I'm gonna do is every time I'm coming up to a stop sign like I am right now, I'm gonna go ahead and shift down. So L3, I'm only saying it because I don't think you can see it. L2, L1. Okay, now I'm gonna accelerate. I'm gonna, spinning the tires even though I'm not trying to. Gravelly, there we go. L2, L3, L4. I'm accelerating pretty light right now. L5. We're keeping the RPMs around 25 to 3,000 RPM. L6. And L7. And we are doing 60 miles an hour. We're gonna cruise at this speed for a little bit, see if it gives us any red flags, any alerts, whatever. Oh, we're going over 60, 65. And I let off the throttle and it did not do anything. So this might actually work for you guys to bring it to a shop. This is awesome. All right, what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna go ahead and stop recording. If anything comes up, I will let you know. If it doesn't, I will also let you know. And we will see what the results are as far as having those solenoids in there like this. I'm hoping this is gonna be a good solution for those who need this option. Now, you can see I do have the steering wheel a bit crooked. I'm gonna have to address that. I'm gonna have to go on the computer, do a steering angle relearn. Well, I'm gonna try adjusting the rack and pinion first and get it centered as close as I can, and then do a steering angle relearn. In order to adjust that, what I'm gonna have to do is I'm gonna have to remember this exact position because I'm going straight right now, and utilize this exact position when I get in the shop. I'll put it right here, and then I need to park it on the floor, get under the vehicle, and move the rack and pinion until this steering wheel is centered. And I should be close enough that I'll be good to go. So there's a little tip for you on that. All right, I'm gonna continue my test drive. Test drive went really well. I just kept the RPMs up fairly decent, you know, trying to keep it above 1500 essentially. I did for a little while sitting here cruising down the gravel. It was at like 1200 RPM, but in the manual mode, and it did not activate the DFM. So you might actually be good to go manual mode altogether, but don't take my word for it completely, because I know GM likes to change things per vehicle, and sometimes they'll screw with you. Some vehicles act differently than other vehicles. So what my suggestion would be is keep it above 1500 RPM, manually shifting it. You should be able to get to a tuner and go from there. Now, you can see I'm standing in front of the truck, or, well, sort of, beside and in front, and I'm doing that for a reason. I wanted to show you guys, remember the ticking that was there? This test drive, I did not rev it up at all. Like, I think my maximum RPM was 3600 RPM, so I really did not rev it out much. And really quiet, really quiet. So, like I said, don't stress if you hear that ticking, because it most likely will go away as soon as you really get oil flowing through the system. And honestly, I did not really get oil flowing through the system. I just drove it long enough to get it up to temperature, which then thins out the oil enough to get through the system. So, now as far as the rest of it goes, we're gonna get the tune done, and I'll show you guys the process for doing that in case you need that. If you're not interested in that, like, share, subscribe. I'll see you guys on the next video. But for those of you who need to stick around because you need to know the tune, I will do that right now. So I did figure out the tune, and the vehicle's out the door already. So what I'm gonna do instead of doing it on the vehicle with the video because of weird scenario, I'll explain in a second, I'm gonna just show you the compare file. So the stock file versus the after file, and explain how to go about the process. So first things first though, the original OG cabled MPVI will not work for tuning a 2021. They have a requirement via HP tuners. I don't know if it's because there's some kind of communication issue between that and the newer vehicles or what, but I know like on a 2022 F-150 for example, you also have to have the newer device in order to tune the thing. So I ended up having to buy an MPVI 3. This is the newest one that they have. The 2 may or may not work. I have no idea. I did not look into it. But they do have it listed on the website in a place I did not expect to find it. So I was hoping when I looked up the vehicle it would tell me what I need. It did not say anything about what device I need per the vehicle. It just said you have to have the E90 tuning done. But when you do look at the E90 tuning section, if I could ever get this to go, there we go. When you do look at the E90 tuning section, it does explain it in the description here. And this is for, of course, L84, L87. But it's a ways down here that it tells you about what your requirement is. Okay, so I don't have time for screen sharing, so I'm just going to do it this way. But it's good enough for what we're looking at. So on the website here, we have the under E90, E93 ECM upgrade. Now this is quite a ways down from the top, right? So you go way up here and you got your very top. You got to scroll down, and way down over here is where it actually tells you. And so we have where it explains the credits, right? But right above that credit section, so it's the third little thing down here, your modified E90 can only be tuned via OBD2 port with the latest version of VCM Suite and the MPVI 2, MPVI 2 Plus, or MPVI 3 interface. So that is the requirement in order to get this done. You have to have something more than the original MPVI. So with all that done, we are in the HP Tuners software now. This is the actual tuning software. Now I used the beta software. I think it says it somewhere up here, but anyway. So this is the beta software, and when you go into the vehicle, you have to plug that device in. Then, of course, you have to read the vehicle up here. Once the reading of the vehicle is all completed, and you cannot do that unless you have the newer device, that's why I had to mention that. Once your reading is all completed, you'll have access to all this information here. Now, under Engine, right here, you go to Fuel, and then you want to go to this Lean Save here. And there is this little section right here. If you hover over things in HP Tuners, right? So you hover over it, and right down here it will explain what it does. So you hover, like say if I hover over this, you see how that changes? Well, if I hover over this, it tells me DOD disable RPM. Now they're still calling it DOD in here. I have no idea why. It's obviously not that anymore. But DOD is disabled if RPM is above this value. So what I did, we'll go to the file that I have afterward, is I went in here and I changed it to just 50 RPM. I mean, I probably could have zeroed it out. I don't know. I just put it at 50. You're obviously never going to be running at 50 RPM. So I threw it at 50. So if you go here, this is what's called a compare. It tells you how much you changed it. Okay. So we'll go back to the original file again. So that's the only thing I changed in this particular area. But we also want to go in and go to engine diag here. So under engine diag here, we have a whole bunch of codes that get triggered when certain events happen, right? So it starts out with the B codes, goes to C codes, etc. What we need to do is we need to get all the way down to P3000 codes. And we're going to scroll down here until we get there. It'll take me a minute. And once we get down to the P3000 code area here, you can see P305F, this one, but this is the 3000 area because it's P3. We need to continue down until we get down to P3105. This is the first section we're going to run into, and you can see, since I have the compare file open, this is going to be an advantage to you. You can see the amount of ones here that I have changed. We have the green section here, that's all green box, that's all changed. I unchecked every single one of these, and these ones are labeled as cylinder deactivation solenoid valve high control circuit low voltage. So cylinder 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, etc. And then if I scroll down a little bit more, there's going to be another section right here, and it starts with cylinder deactivation intake control valve circuit open or closed. And we uncheck that, and we go all the way down until 3460 cylinder 8 deactivation solenoid circuit, and I believe that was the last thing that I checked off. Now, I don't know if this was completely necessary. I would imagine it is, because I would think it would show the code immediately after turning the key on if I didn't do this, because these vehicles are extremely picky. But the older generation, when you were under this area and you disable this, so it had enable and disable. Well, this doesn't have the option to disable it, it only has the option to RPM it. So I believe this one would throw engine codes if you did not do anything. However, maybe if this is set to 0, you might get away with it. I don't know, but because it might never check it. I just doubt it. I think this is going to be a requirement on these newer ones. I have not tried it without doing it yet. This is my first one. I just wanted to get it done. So there's that. And then of course you need to take and write the tune to the vehicle and go through that process, and you need to make sure you have credits to do so, and we're not going to cover that portion of it necessarily, but it's fairly self-explanatory, and there's plenty of other tutorials on that out there. Heck, there's probably a tutorial on this out there as well, but this video has gone on too long. Now before you go, I want you to hear me out quick, because I got a few things I want to cover as a last minute thing. First off, leave a comment below. What did you think? This is the longest term video I've ever done in one single video. Usually I like to break them apart. So what do you think of that? Furthermore, this is also a first for me in that this is the longest test drive I have ever taken a customer vehicle on. Now, the vehicle's gone, but I did take this vehicle for a single trip, multiple shutdowns, fuel, food, whatever, 500-mile test drive. Why, you may ask? I'll get to that. But I also took it on a 100-mile test drive before that 500-mile test drive. So I test drove this vehicle for 600 miles, and not just to make sure it's good. The first 100 miles was to make sure it was good and ready for the next 500. Now, why would I take such an insanely long trip with a customer vehicle? Obviously, 600 miles of driving takes a considerable amount of my time. It was literally 10.5 to 11 hours of driving time just test driving the vehicle, and then I had to do another 500 miles to come back with a different vehicle. And there's where the catch comes in. So, the reason I was willing to go on such a crazy test drive is because this customer, his previous vehicle, happened to be exactly the vehicle I am looking for, minus the fact that it runs. I'll explain. So, the vehicle he owned was a 2004 Suburban. I have a 2004 Tahoe. I wanted a 2003 to 2004 Suburban. I wanted the longer, bigger sized vehicle. I have a family. I needed a place to put things when I go on trips. The Tahoe just wasn't quite cutting it. It was just a little too small. I built a receiver thing on the back of it so that I could go on these long trips, put stuff on the back. But when it rained, it became a cluster F. A Suburban would be ideal. Also, my Tahoe is rusting apart, okay? So, this guy had a vehicle from California in an area where there is apparently no moisture. It must not be close to the ocean. It must be more desertous area where it was. I don't know. Regardless, and he moved to Nevada. Now, he had this Suburban that is completely rust-free. It's got some faded paint. It's got some other little details that I'm going to have to take care of. Nothing major aside from the paint. I don't know if I'd call that major or not. Maybe some of you would. But I want your opinion on this. What do I do with the vehicle? Leave a comment below. It's a two-wheel drive Suburban, completely rust-free, needs paint, needs a little body, but I need way more power. It's got a 5.3. I am going to build a 427 for it, regardless. Now, this 427 is going to be a very torquey monster because I am going to use it for towing occasionally, so I want it to have plenty of torque. So I'm going to profile the cam on torque, which means it's going to have the availability for boost. Yes, it'll be a bit choppy of a cam. It'll be a bit of aggressive cam for boost, but believe it or not, that kind of cam loves boost as long as it's not too aggressive, okay? It will actually be very efficient with boost. So, I'm considering adding boost to it, but it's expensive. And that will hamper anything else I want to do to the vehicle because it's going to be quite expensive. So, what are your thoughts? Do I go straight up high horsepower, torque, everything on the drivetrain? Or do I just go 427 for now? Plenty of torque for what I need, not going to be insane and crazy, and work on the body. Also, the other thing I'm curious about, what do you think of this? It is two-wheel drive. I have all the components to convert it to all-wheel drive here in my shop, available to me. Do I convert it to all-wheel drive? Yay, nay? I'm still debating. Maybe if I put too much power to it, I'll have to go to all-wheel drive so I can maintain traction. Things like that. Leave a comment below. Let me know what you thought. Let me know what you think. And we will go from there. Like, share, subscribe, and as always, I will see you on the next video. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.